This is the map of Israel, gradually zooming out until we reach Jerusalem. Over thousands of years, Jerusalem has held immense significance as one of the most renowned places in human history. It has been regarded as a holy site by three major religions: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. The New Testament recounts pivotal events from Jesus' life occurring within the vicinity of the Second Temple, while the Quran and other Muslim texts mention the temple and emphasize its great sanctity. According to Islamic tradition, the Prophet Muhammad initiated his miraculous night journey to heaven from this very location during the 7th century. Both followers of Judaism and Christianity ardently anticipate a significant event in Jerusalem, the reconstruction of the temple, which would mark the establishment of the Third Temple on this site. However, despite growing momentum, the actual construction of the Third Temple poses numerous challenges that have surfaced. Referring to the Hebrew Bible in 1 Kings chapter 5, verse 9, it is mentioned that King Solomon constructed the first temple in the 10th century BCE. Nevertheless, the sanctity of the site predates Solomon's temple by hundreds, if not thousands, of years. King David, Solomon's father, had originally acquired the land with the intention of building a grand temple himself. However, due to David's sins, as depicted in the biblical story, the Lord rejected his ambition, and the task was passed down to Solomon. The land that David had chosen encompassed a threshing floor associated with Moriah, the place where Abraham's son Isaac was nearly sacrificed. In the Bible, this mount is also referred to as Zion, a name that eventually came to represent the entirety of the land of Israel. This tradition is shared among the three major monotheistic religions, and although there are only a few minor references to the site in the Bible, it is not explicitly clear why Solomon chose to build his temple there. However, what is evident is that the temple was meant to serve as a permanent dwelling for the Ark of the Covenant, or Aaron's rod, which held the stone tablets of the law that Moses received on Mount Sinai and accompanied the Israelites during their journey through the desert. The temple was intended to be the abode of their God, who would be represented in the form of an idol, contrasting the beliefs of pagan peoples. Initially, the Israelites perceived the temple as God's literal residence, but as their understanding of God evolved, they began to view God as universal and omnipresent rather than confined to a specific location. Consequently, the sanctuary transformed from a place where God resided into a place where people gathered to offer sacrifices and worship God. The temple was designed to function as a central facility for the united monarchy, serving as the primary site for sacrifices to God. The innermost sanctum of the temple, known as the Holy of Holies, was believed to house God's presence. However, throughout history, Solomon's temple faced numerous attacks from foreign powers and was ultimately destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonian king, in 586 BCE. Subsequently, the people of Judah endured a brief exile in modern-day Iraq. Following the fall of Babylon, the Persian Emperor Cyrus the Great allowed the Jews to return to the land of Israel in 538 BCE. A rebuilt temple was dedicated in 515 BCE, serving as a precursor to the grand structure known as Herod's Temple, which fulfilled various prophecies. The Second Temple, led by Herod, who was of both Jewish and Idumean descent and served as the Roman-appointed king of Judea, was an expanded and significantly improved structure. However, Herod passed away in 4 BCE, and despite its grandeur, the temple stood for less than a century, with its completion around 20 BCE. The first Jewish revolt began in 66 CE, and in 70 CE, the Roman general, later Emperor Titus, pillaged and destroyed the temple. This event marked the destruction of the Second Temple and the subsequent devastation of Jerusalem, leading to the exile of its inhabitants. During the Second Jewish Revolt from 132 to 135, Judaism underwent a significant transformation. It shifted from being a temple-centric religion that heavily relied on daily sacrifices to a more mobile faith centered around the observance of Jewish law and prayer. As a result, adherence to Judaism spread rapidly throughout the Mediterranean region and beyond. Synagogues replaced the solitary temple, yet their orientation continued to face Jerusalem, symbolizing its enduring significance. Animal sacrifices gave way to prayer, although Jews still mourned the destruction of the temple, especially on Tisha B'Av, the day traditionally associated with the destruction of both the first and second temples, as well as other calamities that befell the Jewish people. The question arises whether the temple will ever be rebuilt, and some find hope in certain prophecies within the Bible. One such prophecy is found in Amos chapter 9, verses 14 and 15, which proclaims the return of exiled Israel and their restoration of ruined cities, vineyards, and gardens. It states that Israel will be planted in their land and will never again be uprooted from it, implying the potential for the rebuilding of a third temple in Jerusalem. However, there are skeptics worldwide who believe that God has forsaken the people of Israel and attribute the rebirth of Israel solely to human efforts. Nevertheless, the Bible presents a different perspective, teaching that God never intended to abandon his chosen people indefinitely. This interpretation is supported by certain prophecies, such as Isaiah chapter 41 verse 9, which emphasizes God's selection of Israel, the descendants of Abraham, and his affirmation that they are his chosen servants, not rejected or abandoned. Another prophecy in Isaiah chapter 43 verses 5 to 6 speaks of the scattered nation of Israel returning to their promised land, assuring them of God's presence and his gathering of their offspring from various directions. So why would the Jews desire to construct another temple? To explore this question, we turn to Rabbi Moses Maimonides, a Jewish philosopher and Torah scholar, who delved into the significance of the temple for Jews. According to his writings on the laws of God's chosen house, the temple served two primary functions. Firstly, it served as a physical manifestation of God's divine presence, which resided above the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant. This is reflected in 2 Kings chapter 25 verse 22, where God declares his intention to meet with his people above the cover between the two cherubim that rest upon the Ark of the Testimony, providing them with his commands. The second function of the temple is to facilitate the necessary sacrifices. However, since the destruction of the Second Temple in AD 70, the Jewish people have been unable to offer these sacrifices. In fact, 202 of the 613 commandments in the Torah, known as mitzvah, cannot be fulfilled in the absence of a temple. Consequently, without a temple in Jerusalem, Jews have adapted their worship practices to their local community synagogues, emphasizing prayer, repentance, and acts of charity instead of animal sacrifices. Considering the political landscape, rebuilding the temple may be met with hesitation from the country of Israel. In fact, Israeli law prohibits Jews from praying at the temple site, and Muslim groups, like the Women in Black, vigilantly monitor Jewish presence there. Furthermore, the Islamic authorities officially deny the existence of a temple on the site. However, there are movements and groups actively preparing for its construction. One such movement is the Temple Movement, which commenced its preparations in 1987. The leaders of the Temple Movement believe that the Jewish people are not living up to the spiritual potential intended by God due to the absence of the divine presence, known as the Shekinah, in the world. The Temple Institute has gone as far as producing all the required ritual vessels for the functioning of the temple and works to train priests for their future roles. They perceive a direct link between the need for a new level of spiritual attainment and the rebuilding of the temple. According to their beliefs, the Shekinah can only be restored through the temple, resolving both the current issues faced by the Jewish people and the world at large. Another organization involved in preparing Israeli society for the temple's rebuilding is the Temple Mount Faithful. They conduct demonstrations advocating for the temple's reconstruction, symbolically laying the cornerstone for the third temple and producing various temple-related items. Gershon Solomon, the director of Temple Mount Faithful, asserts that building the third temple is an essential step towards the complete redemption of the people of the Bible in the land of the Bible. He envisions the Temple Mount as the central focal point of Israeli life and the Israeli state, stating that he cannot imagine a future without it. The Sanhedrin group has taken on the ambitious project of planting the biblical temple forest, which will cater to the agricultural needs of the third temple. It is worth noting that many of the sacrifices performed in the previous temples included offerings of plants, not just animals. Rabbi Rickman, who is a member of the Sanhedrin, has been entrusted with the task of reintroducing the sacred red heifer to Israel. The ashes of the red heifer, mixed with water, are required for the purification of Jews who wish to serve in the temple, as stated in Numbers chapter 19. Throughout the period between the First and Second Temples, which spanned approximately 1,000 years, only 9 red heifers were used to prepare the purifying waters. According to Jewish tradition, the 10th red heifer will be used by the Messiah. Rickman, along with other rabbis from the Temple Institute, is working alongside an Israeli cattleman who specializes in animal husbandry science. Together, they are employing the method of implanting frozen embryos of red Angus cattle, originally from North America, into domestic cattle in Israel. This process ensures the availability of a red heifer in Israel for the red heifer ceremony. It is important to note that a red heifer cannot be transported to Israel for this purpose, as it must have never worn a yoke and should be born within the land. However, a significant question arises regarding the location of the Third Temple. While the Temple Mount remains the preferred choice for many, the current reality of Muslim control over the site necessitates some form of political intervention to enable Jewish access. The Israeli Supreme Court, in its ruling on the issue of construction on the Temple Mount, acknowledges the complexity and sensitivity of the situation. They state that resolving this dispute requires political action rather than solely relying on legal decisions. The court emphasizes that the historical connection to the temple is a matter that should be addressed by the political echelon, providing content and significance to the claim that the temple belongs to the Jewish people. We invite you to share your thoughts on the possibility of the third Jewish temple being built in the comments section below.